Welcome back to another episode of Hack Your Blood Sugar. Today, I'm going to outline a 4-week system that we follow in our program, Hack Your Blood Sugar, using a CGM. It's more than just a plan, it's a system that has been proven effective in those crucial initial weeks of using a continuous glucose monitor. So I was prompted to create this episode from a conversation that I had with someone about 2 weeks ago. I met a woman at a networking event, and she had been using a continuous glucose monitor with one of the tech companies for a couple of months. And I was intrigued, and I asked if I could have a look at her app. And she showed it to me, but she also proceeded to tell me how the data all felt very overwhelming. She was very excited about it initially, but really hadn't made much progress with it because she just didn't know what to do. And I couldn't help, and she'd already been using it for a few months, and I couldn't help thinking of the folks in my groups, in my 4-week group programs, because after completing 4 weeks, they were all pros at using this technology and how to interpret the data. In fact, they also had a good idea of what strategy to use by now, and some of them had actually reported to me that they had gone to set up friends and family members on their own continuous glucose monitors without any further input from me. So I thought, well, it seems like understanding a framework of how to work would be helpful. So, starting a journey with a tech tool, like any kind of tech tool, but we're talking specifically about continuous glucose monitors, it actually demands some dedicated attention upfront, ideally for about a month, maybe 6 weeks. And rushing into it without a clear strategy, I find often leads to wasted resources and subpar results. And so, setting up some realistic goals and devising a clear strategy to use really helps to structure your own pursuits. And so what I'm going to try to do today is explain, I hope I can explain how we set goals and create strategies in our group in hopes that you can use this structure for your own pursuits. So, with that said, in our small group programs, which is, I usually cap them around 12 or 15 people, but sometimes they can be less. Each participant will, of course, have unique overarching goals, like that someone's trying to reverse diabetes. Some people might be trying to lose weight, improve some of their labs. But there are common objectives for us all for the month. And there's 5 of them. Everyone needs to master the technology aspects of the CGM. It's a learning curve. Everyone seeks to understand the strengths and weaknesses of this technology because it's not perfect. It doesn't tell you everything, but it does tell you some useful stuff. Everyone is going to learn to assess their metabolic health as much as we can with the data available and learn what influences blood sugar levels positively or negatively and craft a 1 to 3 month plan based on the insights that they gathered. And an intensive 4-week structure offers a very realistic time frame for significant progress. And for many, simple adjustments to daily routines yield noticeable improvements. However, for others, deeper issues such as sleep, stress, or inflammation may need addressing before progress can be made. So they might not see immediate improvements, but things can be ruled out. So, with all that said, let's dive into the system and the steps involved. And admittedly, just knowing the steps may not be enough, but I think it will help the committed DIYer with some knowledge about blood sugar out there to understand what's involved. So, here's the process in a nutshell, and then I'll go through each one of these steps in a little more detail. It involves collecting data, reviewing data to make an assessment, experimenting with a few strategies to see if they move the needle, evaluating the results, and then committing to the changes for a period of time before reassessing. And this might sound simple and obvious, but I can tell you that it can be very challenging to stay the course with this on your own. So now I think it would be helpful to go through each one of these steps in a little bit more detail with some real life examples. So the first step is collecting data. Spend 1 to 2 weeks gathering data on your usual diet and lifestyle. Log inputs diligently so you can review them later. This step gets overlooked the most, and it's because, quite understandably, people are very anxious to just jump in and try to improve their blood sugar right away with their first sensor. And that's not enough time. It's just not enough time for most people. You will want to do your best to spend that first week or two trying things out to learn what impacts your blood sugar the most. And the reason you do this is you want to see where you spend the most time with your blood sugar levels being too high and put your energy there. So it's a numbers game. You're trying to reduce your body's exposure to high blood sugar. So, for example, statistically speaking, that monthly treat at the bakery that you stop to literally once a month that takes your blood sugar up over 180, that is not going to have as significant an impact on your overall health as, say, that routinely eating a late dinner or an evening snack that keeps your blood sugar levels elevated all night long. That being elevated all night long, that is where you'll want to put your effort. So you want to see what some of these routines are and decide where to put your energy. And again, I'm going to go back to the 80-20 rule. What's the 20% of efforts that are going to make 80% of the difference in your health? You will also want to catch the low-hanging fruit. Like, what are some of the things that are detrimental to your blood sugar that you could easily just live without? It's so nice to know those things. And at the same time, don't fix what ain't broke. You might just get lucky and find that some of your usuals are very blood sugar friendly. And so on to step 2, reviewing the data. And now I know this sounds obvious, but you will want to analyze trends over that 2-week period of collecting data, seeking insights and prioritizing areas for improvement. And I did actually just talk about that in the description for the first one. But this is why taking notes in your CGM app is so important. When you go back and review those 2 weeks of data, and you're putting your scientist hat on here, you will want to be able to connect the dots between your blood sugar readings and your food, your drink, your sleep, your stress, your exercise, whatever. And so this part can be complicated. And honestly, this is the part where I tend to partner with people to help them learn how to interpret their data and make sense of things. But getting a good assessment can save you a lot of time in finding strategies that will make the difference. Otherwise, you're just, shooting in the dark. For example, here's a real life example. You might notice that your overnight blood sugar doesn't come down below 120 mgs per deciliter all night long. So for those of you using different units, let's say your blood sugar is elevated about 30 points higher than you'd want it to be, or it's just not coming down as low as you'd like. Is this because you're eating too late at night? Do you have overall insulin resistance, or is it because of sleep problems? Right? Because if it's sleep problems, you don't want to, how much time are you going to waste changing your diet? Okay, so on to step 3. I'll call this step tweaking. And tweaking involves just experimenting with 1 or 2 changes at a time, focusing on the areas like overnight blood sugar levels. And I use that example because that's often the first place I look when we're trying to improve things. If someone's blood sugar level is high overnight, we work on that first. So your tweaks might include meal timing or snacking habits. And honestly, it is not unusual for positive results, to show up in just a day or 2. And so obviously the next step here is evaluation. You want to assess the effectiveness of your changes. And if your changes are successful and you see things coming down, you'll want to integrate them into your daily routine. And if not, you will want to explore alternative solutions. So in our example of high overnight blood sugars, if blood sugar has not come down to around, like if it started at 120 overnight consistently, if your blood sugars haven't come down to at least like 110 overnight, a little bit of improvement, then that means there might be something else going on. But if it has, like even if it's come down from 120 to 110 consistently overnight, it means it's moving in the right direction and you've had a success. But if not, Then you'll want to consider some other strategies like sleep hygiene or adaptogens or even a sleep study. And then let's be realistic. You may need to try a few cycles of tweaking and evaluation. So you can rinse and repeat those last two steps a few times. And that's what we usually do in the group until you gain some traction with your blood sugar. But then here's the next important step of this initial process of using a CGM to hack your blood sugar. And it is to commit to changes for 1 to 3 months. And here's why. I want you to select 1 to 3 changes to implement consistently over the next 1 to 3 months and establish some mechanisms for accountability because you might just fall off the wagon on those things. So really help yourself can be consistent with those. And here's the thing. I'm going to use our example of high overnight blood sugar again. If eating earlier was the plan, recruit some support from the rest of your family to help with getting dinner on earlier and not passing around the huge Costco bag of chips in front of the TV later on. Or if better sleep hygiene is on the menu for you, then consider setting an alarm on your phone to start your bedtime routine earlier. And this is an important note that I want you to hear and I want you to remember. Even if you only see slight improvements in your blood sugar in a week or two of experimenting, that doesn't mean you need to pile on more changes to get things to improve more. Even if you only see slight improvements and you have more improvements to go, you don't need to pile on more changes. It may be sufficient to stay the course with those few changes you've identified over another month or so, because they may continue to pay dividends as you keep going. And this is because good blood sugar control begets good blood sugar control over time. So if you're good blood sugar control for a couple of days, that might start improving glucose tolerance and improving insulin sensitivity, and then that makes it easier and easier. So it gets better over time. Besides, it's much more likely that you will sustain like 1 to 2 changes over 3 months than if you changed 5 things, right? And if you can't sustain it long term, I don't think there's really use in doing it. It's all about what you can do long term. And the final step in this process, in this initial 4 to 6 week process of using your CGM, is reassessment. After about 3 months, I think it's helpful to reevaluate your blood sugar, either using a CGM or other metrics like hemoglobin A1C or lipid panels to track progress. So I want you to think about it this way. I don't know if you know anybody like this or if you've done it yourself, but it can be very motivating if you want to keep your workout up, if you want to exercise more regularly, to schedule a race, to schedule an event some months down the road to give you something to work towards. It's very motivating. It just kind of blocks off a time period for you. And so booking some labs a few months out can be that way for this process. So once you start this process, make a lab appointment, 2, 3 months out, and it gives you a deadline to shoot for. And I encourage it depends on what you're working towards, but I encourage you to repeat your hemoglobin A1C, your fasting insulin levels, and your lipid panels to get a look at your triglycerides. Of course, it's nice to get those before this process too. And I want to talk about high triglyceride levels because they can drop dramatically. If they were high before doing this, triglyceride levels will drop dramatically in a couple of months when your blood sugar level improves because they will go up in response to insulin. And it is lovely to see that result from your efforts. And it brings your doctor on board. It's nice to be working with your doctor and to see what works. And now many people like to continue using a CGM during that time, during that 2 or 3 months where you're staying the course, because it gives them some extra accountability and it's kind of fun. But I like to say a few things about this. And first, it's actually not necessary to use a CGM this entire time. Once you identify strategies that are effective for you, you can stop using it for a time. It just saves some money. and just carry on with the changes you've identified. But it really depends what works for you. If you do keep if you do decide to keep using a CGM to monitor your blood sugar, there's actually a different strategy that I like to use to make it more manageable over the long term. But I think I'm going to save that for the next episode because I think this episode's gone on long enough. So I think the next episode, stay tuned. Long-term use strategies seems like a good topic for the next episode. So in summary for today, I find a structured approach to using a continuous glucose monitor in the beginning. It really helps maintain focus and prevents overwhelm from data. So I encourage you when you start out using it to get clear about your goals and your strategies and map it out for yourself so that you can stay on track using this structure. And while continued CGM usage is optional after the 4 to 6 weeks, I have seen it really aid in accountability and provide some ongoing insights. But just as much, I've seen it really do people's heads in. So I encourage you to stay tuned for the next episode so we can talk about some strategies around that. All right. So good luck with this. And as always, please let me know if you have questions or comments. I love to hear from you.